In 2018, inside a laboratory at the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology in Leipzig, a researcher pressed a small drill against a fragment of skull. The skull had been excavated from Shari-Sokta, the Burnt City, a Bronze Age metropolis buried beneath the desert of Sistan, on the eastern edge of the Iranian plateau. The drill bit in. A fine white powder fell into a collection tube. Inside that dust was a secret that had been waiting 4,800 years. A secret that would quietly dismantle a national myth 3 millennia in the making. Iranians know their history. Perhaps too well. They are the descendants of the Aryans. A noble people who swept down from the north, carrying with them a sacred language, the fire of Zarathustra, and the blueprint for the world's first empire. The Achaemenids. Cyrus the Great. Persepolis. The very word Iran derives from the old Iranian Aryanam, land of the Aryans, inscribed in the Avesta thousands of years ago. The nation and its name are fused into a single, unbroken identity. Throughout the 20th century, this story was confirmed by linguistics, by ancient texts, by archaeology, and by pride. The method was straightforward: take living Iranians, analyze their mitochondrial DNA, find a connection to Indo-European populations, and the myth hardens into science. The story was clean. It made sense. It explained the language, the literature, the empire. History told through pottery, inscriptions, and royal proclamations pointed in one direction. But nobody had the technology to truly test it. Until now. For decades, population genetics relied heavily on mitochondrial DNA, mtDNA. It's passed exclusively through the maternal line, unchanged from mother to child. Convenient. Abundant. And fundamentally limited. Using mitochondrial DNA to understand the genetic history of an entire civilization is like trying to understand the demographics of a great city by knocking on one door per household and asking only about the mother's side of the family. You see one thin strand. You lose the entire picture. Whole genome sequencing of ancient DNA, ADNA, changed everything. This isn't one thread. It's the entire rope. All 23 chromosome pairs, read simultaneously, compared against thousands of ancient and modern genomes stored in databases that didn't exist 20 years ago. When scientists applied this method to bones excavated across the Iranian plateau, from 10,000-year-old hunter-gatherers to medieval city dwellers, they didn't just complicate the story. They rewrote it. Layer 1, the survivors. Before any empire. Before any Aryan. Before any written language. On the Iranian plateau, in the mountain valleys of the Zagros range, lived hunter-gatherers who had survived the last glacial maximum in isolated refugia, pockets of habitable terrain where populations endured while ice sheets buried the north. These people, the Zagros hunter-gatherers, were genetically distinct. Not Anatolian. Not Levantine. Not Steppe. They were their own biological world, shaped by tens of thousands of years of isolation in the mountains. This was the original substrate. This was the beginning. Layer 2, the first rupture, the farmers. Around 8,000 years ago, the Neolithic revolution reached the Iranian plateau. But here, it unfolded differently than in Europe. While Anatolian farmers replaced European hunter-gatherers in a near-total demographic sweep, on the Iranian plateau agriculture appears to have emerged from within. Zagros populations themselves transitioned into farming communities. Yet movement followed. Zagros-related farmers pushed westward into Mesopotamia and eastward into Central Asia and South Asia, spreading their genetic signature across the ancient world. The Iranian plateau was not receiving the world. It was seeding it. But the plateau itself was also changing, with incoming Levantine and Anatolian populations arriving through trade routes and gradual migration. The biological substrate was already shifting. Layer 3, the steppe expansion. The Bronze Age. This is the moment the Iranian national narrative calls the coming of the Aryans. And it is, partially, true. Populations carrying the genetic signature of the Pontic-Caspian steppe, linked to the Amnaya culture, did arrive. They brought with them Indo-Iranian languages, the wheel, metallurgy, and a new biological layer deposited over everything that came before. But here's what the myth omits. That steppe component in modern Iranians averages between 15 and 25% of total ancestry. Not a majority. Not a foundation. It was laid on top of an already complex substrate, Zagros hunter-gatherer, early farmer, Levantine. The Aryans arrived. But they did not create Iranians. They added one layer to what was already there. By the time Cyrus the Great built Persepolis, the biological substrate of his people had already been overwritten twice. Layer 4, the Imperial disruption. The Persian Empire was the first globalization project in human history. The Achaemenids moved entire peoples across their domain, Babylonians, Egyptians, Greeks, Scythians, Indians, as slaves, soldiers, craftsmen, and administrators. Alexander's conquest seeded Greek colonies and left behind admixed populations across the plateau. The Parthians reintroduced steppe-related ancestry from Central Asia. The Sasanians maintained centuries of intense contact with the Levant, Armenia, and Mesopotamia. Every empire left behind more than coins and inscriptions. Every empire left behind DNA. Layer 5, the Islamic conquest and the Turkic waves. In the 7th century, the Arab conquest brought not only a new religion but a new genetic stream, Levantine and Arabian ancestry, deposited most heavily in the southwest. Centuries later, Turkic migrations, the Seljuks, the Mongols, the Timurids, introduced Central and East Asian components, visible to this day in northeastern Iran and Azerbaijan. By 1935, when Reza Shah officially renamed the country from Persia to Iran, explicitly invoking Aryan heritage, the genome of his nation was already the product of 5 distinct biological ruptures. The name reached back 3,000 years. The biology told a far older, far more layered story. Consider Persepolis at the height of Achaemenid power. The very symbol of Iranian civilization. Clay tablets recovered from the treasury and fortification wall list the workers who built it: Egyptians, Babylonians, Ionians, Bactrians, Lydians. ADNA studies from burial sites in Fars province dating to the Achaemenid period reveal a population already carrying substantial Near Eastern and South Caucasian admixture, even at the geographic and political heart of the empire. The eternal city of Persia was, biologically, a crossroads long before any myth said otherwise. And here is the deeper truth the ancient DNA reveals: the Iranian plateau was never a point of origin from which one pure people spread outward. It was a transit corridor, one of the most consequential intersections in human prehistory, through which Zagros hunters, Anatolian farmers, steppe nomads, Semitic merchants, Greek soldiers, Arab conquerors, and Turkic khans all passed, each leaving a fragment of themselves behind. The Iranians built an eternal civilization. But they did not build an eternal people. This is where the Iranian case becomes not just scientifically significant, but philosophically extraordinary. The Arab conquest of the 7th century reshaped Iranian religion permanently. It left a measurable signature in the genome. But it did not kill the Persian language. Farsi not only survived, it flourished. The 9th and 10th centuries, when the genetic imprint of Arab admixture was already present in the population, produced Ferdowsi, Rudaki, and the Shahnameh, the national epic that codified Iranian identity in 60,000 verses written in almost pure Persian. The Ghaznavid sultans, Turkic rulers, conducted their court in Persian. The Mongol Ilkhans, who sacked Baghdad and shattered the Abbasid Caliphate, adopted Persian administration, Persian poetry, and Persian aesthetic culture. Conquerors arrived. They altered the genome. And then they dissolved into the civilization they had conquered. This is the Iranian paradox. And it delivers a lesson that ancient DNA repeats across every nation it touches. Genetic ancestry does not predict cultural identity. The attempt to use DNA as evidence of cultural purity or continuity is not science. It is a shortcut, one that produces beautiful narratives and wrong conclusions. Biological identity is in constant motion. Cultural identity can be remarkably, stubbornly persistent. And these two things are not the same. Modern Iran is not a single genome. It is a genetic map with clearly drawn fault lines. In the north, in Gilan and Mazandaran, behind the wall of the Alborz Mountains, populations genetically closer to Georgians and Armenians than to the inhabitants of the central plateau. The mountains preserve the Caucasian component that the lowlands lost centuries ago. In the northeast, in Khorasan, the Central Asian imprint of Turkic migrations reaches its maximum density on Iranian soil. In the southwest, in Khuzestan, Arabian admixture peaks, a living record of centuries of contact across what is now the Iran-Iraq border. And then there is the Zagros. The mountain communities of the western ranges, Kurdish and Luri populations and isolated highland valleys, carry genetic markers that trace back, with remarkable directness, to the original Zagros hunter-gatherers of the Mesolithic. While empires rose and fell across the plateau, while armies moved and religions changed and languages shifted, these mountain communities remained. They are Iran's genetic time capsule. Walking fragments of a world that existed before writing, before empire, before the word Aryan was ever spoken. Stand at a bus stop in Tehran. Look at the person beside you. In their genome, the echo of a Zagros hunter who tracked gazelle through mountain passes 12,000 years ago. A layer of Anatolian farmer. A thin thread of steppe nomad that their ancestors called an Aryan. The trace of a Greek soldier from Alexander's campaign. The mark of an Arab conqueror. The memory of a Turkic Khan. They are not the descendant of the Aryans. They are the descendant of all of them. The next petrous bone pulled from a necropolis beneath the Iranian desert could rewrite this story again. That is not speculation. It is the pattern. Subscribe, so you don't miss the moment history is rewritten again. And tell us in the comments, which nation's DNA do you want us to uncover next?